'Tis I, your old pal, King Chuck. I hope you're having a hunky-dory day. It's hot out here. You're right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My car thermometer says 92, although my watch actually says it's 85. I wonder who's really telling the truth here. It is a little hot day, but then again, we're going to get some thunder showers expected tonight. So anyway, over the weekend, Donald Trump proved to the world that he is a crybaby. And he has to have his way. Look at what he did during his interview with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press. Towards the end, she asked about the 2020 elections, and he threw a fit saying that NBC, CBS, of course CBS, they're really trying to kiss his ass through Barry Weiss, and ABC, all the networks except for Fox, pretty much, Fox or OAN and Newsmax. Oh, they're all bad. They're all bad because they lie about him. Poor Trumpy Wumpy. So yeah, he threw his microphone off and stormed off the set. It looked like they were talking in a barn. And I'm like, okay, man, this is not the sign of a leader. This is the sign of somebody, like on Steve Wilkos, somebody walking off stage after they find out that they've been busted for child molestation. That's who Donald Trump is. He was busted. He got busted because he's a lying piece of shit human being who believes in a huge lie that tragically started where I grew up in Antrim County. I told you the story a few days ago. The county clerk misread the votes. The vote said that, it was a demo page she was looking at. The demo page said Biden won. Of course, obviously, he did not. And it led to one conspiracy theory after another that the voting machines were programmed to make Biden the winner. But guess what? Biden won fair and square. Why? It was because Americans were thrown into one lie after another by the Trump regime. And now it's round two, and the sequel is far worse than the original. Trump said that he was not a wartime president, and now he is. Trump said that gas prices would go down to $1.98 a gallon. Nope. It went up to $4.99 a gallon here in Michigan not too long ago. Of course, thankfully, they've gone back down again. And what are they now? Oh, it did go back up a little bit. $4.39 a gallon now. Yep, it went back up again here in Grand Rapids. People are struggling to find work. It was just announced, the Trump regime released the job numbers last week, and they claimed that companies have added jobs. But yet the question is, how much are they paying? But here's another thing too. The unemployment rate among 20-somethings here in America sucks. I've been there and done that, folks. I got stuck with when I was after I graduated from tech school, I had to live with my mom and stepdad. They wanted me out of the house badly. I had to go back to work at my old high school job washing dishes. And then and then they cut my hours and gave it to a dumbass. And then what happened was I ended up having to work at this crappy little party store stocking shelves, and guess what happened? The party store was sold. It was sold to a bunch of morons who never ran a party store in their lives. Party stores, convenience store, gas station. And even they cut my hours and gave it to another junkie. That's the way of the world, folks. You work hard and your reward is nothing. That's what happens when you're dealing with the Republican Party. It took me a year to get the job that I have now. I've been there for 24 years. Oh, Casey's is still 409. Speedway across the street went up to 439. Yeah, I'm at half a tank. I'm good for now. The long story short, folks, is that Donald Trump, that's what happened. I ended up working, it was, the job I worked at for many. I told you the terrible story the other day. My boss was a piece of shit human being who didn't believe in raises. Grand Rapids was a town that was not, reluctant to give people raises, give people jobs. I mean, I wasn't alone. I had other members of my family in their 20s who were having to live with mommy and daddy. It was not an option for me. I had, my mom and her husband ended up moving to Arizona. And they created the solution that, oh, you're doing fine. No, I wasn't. That's how Republicans like you to think. They think that, well, if they were getting paid $8 an hour back in 1979, it will work in 2009. Yeah, that's boomer logic for you, folks. That's how a baby boomer thinks. The reason why us, Gen Xers, millennials, you name it, why we can't have anything nice. And now Gen Z is fucked because of Trump. And so many of them, they want a career in this, but they end up with a career doing that. I grew up in a small town called, I told you the story. I grew up near Elk Rapids, this tiny town of 1,600 people near Traverse City, Michigan. And the story was, when I was a kid, Elk Rapids. So the story was, when I was a kid, there was this small town. There were a couple of small towns. People in Elk Rapids loved to point and laugh at. And one of them was called Mancelona. Mancelona was another town in Antrim County. And the demographic between Mancelona and Elk Rapids is way different. Mancelona is just one of those hick towns where, I heard a lot of bad stories about Mancelona. As a matter of fact, true story, when my mom and her husband got married and they needed a home, a new house, they ended up moving to this, it was a nice house, and I believe that it was actually, the mailing address was actually Alden. Alden is a small town that's kind of by Rapid City, if you will. Alden's a kind of a quaint town. It's on Torch Lake. It turns out they were in the Mancelona School District, and my stepdad had custody of his kids at the time, and they sure as hell were not taking their kids to Mancelona. And the story that was going around was that Mancelona schools were crumbling. The story that I heard was that part of the high school was condemned. and that the problem with the Mancelona schools, where another big problem wasn't the building, it was the people. And one horrible rumor that I heard was that Mancelona, one terrible rumor I heard was that a lot of the high school girls, a lot of the senior class of Mancelona High School in the late 90s were all pregnant. There was just nothing to do there. Nothing. Mancelona actually used to have a movie theater. The movie theater closed in... it didn't close. It burnt down. I guess the story was... it was called the Lona. And it's where the downtown BP gas station is now, roughly. And the story was, there's really nothing entertaining about Mancelona. It's just a crappy little hick town where the only fun thing teens can do is fuck, I even heard a rumor that the town used to have this IGA grocery store. It was where Family Dollar is now, I believe. Yeah, it was a really tiny IGA, too. It was originally called Johnson's. So what happened was sometime in the late 90s. Oh, so that's why I can't go. Uh-oh. Yeah, a lot of police action last couple of days, unfortunately. So here's the story. It scared the shit out. I kind of hate it when they do that. So let's get back to the rest of the story. Where was I? So they had this little IGA store in Mancelona, and they had a little pizza parlor in there called Iggy's. And because it was an IGA, so they called it Iggy's. And the story was, the reason why it closed was because I guess the health department came in and noticed that there were some human fluids in the prep station in the pizzeria. And what happened was, it tested positive for human fluids, and they said, yep, we're going to close the joint, because they found out that some of the people there were fucking. Yeah, about that. So, and there were a lot of jokes about people of Mancelona. One joke was that, 30 years ago, downtown Mancelona suffered a gigantic fire. There was a humongous fire in downtown Mancelona, and it destroyed an entire block of downtown. So, anyway, what happened was, when that block burnt down, it was Bill the Captain Vogel from 106 KHQ who said this joke about Mancelona, that the fire did about $37.16 worth of damage. And I guess some of the town people called in the station and said, shame on you, you need to apologize. And I hate to say it, but I know that there's probably some good people in Mancelona. It's just too bad that I know some of the sketchier people, because they all worked at my mom's in-laws' little machine shop. And she worked with these people. And, there was a family that lived in a trailer. There was one guy who lived in a trailer with another trailer in their backyard that its roof caved in. These people were really scuzzy people. And yet what was even more depressing was the fact that they, excuse me. I think what was even more depressing was the fact that these people were also giving to, like, the 700 Club. It's like giving Pat Robertson, a jet plane to fly on. his own private jet is not going to get you into heaven. Sorry, not sorry. But that's how life goes. Want to go to heaven? Here's an idea. Do good things. You know? Help somebody out. You know, if there's a friend of yours who is hurting and they need money, I mean, help them out if you have the money. You know? That's one thing. But there's a million other things you can do that I think is far more godly than giving Pat Robertson money. But anyway, so that's the problem. Towns like Mancelona and Kalkaska had problems with their own schools years ago. The schools had to close because of a lack of money, and there was a bond proposal that didn't pass, and that would have kept the schools open. I mean, people in those areas are broke as a joke. They don't, and it's like when people ask for money and having to raise taxes and all that, they're like, oh, hell no. And I don't understand, But anyway, the sad truth is, now those areas are the ones getting more money, getting more people and more younger people to live there. And there's a reason why. It's because everything in like Elk Rapids and Sutton's Bay and even Traverse City has gotten to be too expensive. And when that happens, guess what happens? People have to end up living with these undesirables in Mancelona. And it almost makes me not want to order a pizza there. Man. But you see, that's the thing about now, and another story I want to share with you. And this is another reason why Elk Rapids has gotten to be too expensive to live. It's because, so I have a friend who lives in near the Turtle Creek Casino. And the story was, a number of years ago, she moved to this area. I think I told you the story. But the story was she wanted to raise horses. She chose not to because it was too much money. And so she ended up deciding that she instead, she would just raise cats. But now she says that she's being pressured to sell her land to the Saudis. And it's true, the Saudis are buying up a lot of land in that region because there's a lot of horse farms everywhere, and and the Saudis have these Arab horses. And there are beautiful horses, but now it's causing, basically what they want to do is they want to have these people who have all this land move out, and and how much money are they going to pay them? I don't know. Now, and now my friend, who by the way is over 70 years old, she's like 71, is being pressured to move out, and she doesn't really. She kind of does, but she kind of doesn't want to. And don't get me wrong. This is nothing new. It happened to my dad when he was a little boy. He lived near Detroit, and they were building M59. And what happened was M59. So what happened was his parents were basically forced out of their land, out of their home. So anyway, that's what happened to my mom and dad's parents. They had to move out of their home. It was demolished. The whole neighborhood was demolished. And it makes you think that sometimes if you're driving on a freeway, you're blasting through what used to be a neighborhood or a little business district maybe. That's the way of life sometimes. It's true. A lot of land, a lot of people, even towns have been destroyed because of the interstates and freeways. And But, the good news that came out of it was that my grandparents were able to buy another house, and it was my dad's childhood home, basically. So, and then what happened, but here's the thing. My mom, so the rest of the story is that now what's going on in Albania, and if you haven't heard this already, so Jared Kushner and Trump's daughter, Ivanka, they want to buy this island that has flamingos on there. There's a lot of hardworking people on there. And they want them all to get out so they can put a resort in there. And people are storming the streets. They're rioting. And even the government they're trying to push the Trump family out. Because that's what they're doing. They want people to bow to Trump and move out. And, this is what the Republicans do. They want hardworking Americans to not live in a nice part of town. They want them to live in the ghetto. I mean, that's what happened to me for 19 years. I lived in a crappy apartment complex despite the fact that I busted my dick off. And my boss would always tell me, oh, you're not working hard enough. And I went, and somebody, and I told you in the last podcast, somebody actually stood up to him. And, it's like everybody who has stood up to him, they all got fired. And that's another problem. Unions did that for many, many years. I know how it feels to not have a raise for 10 years. And, without union representation, you end up having to go out and try to find another job. And some of these companies are like, yeah, you don't have enough experience. And that's what happened to me. Even though I had worked my ass off at my job for 10 and a half years and got nowhere. I mean, they were always pushing me backward. My boss was always pushing me backward because of the person he was. And the only thing that saved me was his partner, who finally told him, get the fuck out of here, because our profits are going through the shitter. I know, folks. I know how it feels to not live in the best parts of town. I mean, I know how it feels to have shitty neighbors. And, I once I had a woman who lived upstairs from me at my old apartment complex who flooded half of my apartment because she forgot to turn off her bathtub. And she never came down to apologize or look at what damage she did. She didn't care. I wanted to kick her ass for what she did. And, I had to deal with neighbors who didn't, who would misuse the laundromat, leave their clothes in the dryer for days on end. I decided one time I was this close to throwing some clothes away because it was rude. Even though there were signs everywhere, take care of your clothes. They wouldn't do that because some of these people didn't even know English. You see, folks, this is what Trump does. He and other Republicans want to push you back and demote you into having to be around people you don't want to be around. People who are just low-class people. Who just, like the idiots in Mancelona who probably vote for people like Trump because they don't like black people. And they love to go around and say, yeah, I voted for Trump because I don't like them N-words. Okay, so let's see here. Last year, Northern Michigan got smacked with a massive ice storm. And, there was a ton of property damage. A couple of radio station transmitters collapsed. So here's my question. Guess how much money Trump gave to the people of Northern Michigan? None. And here's the reason why. It's because it's a waste of taxpayer money, according to Trump. Yeah. Folks, this is what the people of Northern Michigan voted for. And, and what's even more depressing is the state, the U.S. representative serving most of Northern Michigan, Jack Bergman, he's a piece of shit. Not only that, he barely even lives in Michigan. He lives like 10 miles from the Wisconsin border. Actually, I shouldn't even say that, because allegedly he spends most of his time now in Louisiana. It's like he's a Michigander in name only. And he doesn't even come up north to do any events. He thinks that people will vote for him because there's an R after his name. Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. If I lived in Northern Michigan and Bergman was my U.S. rep, I'd vote him out. Period. Full stop. Anyway. You see, folks, that's what Republicans do. They love to push people back. It's like being a kid and getting all A's in school. And then what they do, and then it's like, oh, you got to repeat your grade again because, we can only allow X amount of kids in the next grade. And, junior here, yeah, he's a D student, but we got to have a mix of kids here. Yeah. And you get depressed because you worked too hard for nothing. And that's exactly what the Republicans like to do. They want you to fail. Even though you're getting ahead, you're not. And even worse, look at what might happen tonight. Look at what might happen tonight. We should be angry about this, folks. Trump is going to the Knicks game. Knicks and San Antonio, the Spurs. Knicks and Spurs. Knicks have not won an NBA championship since 1973. And this could be their year. First time in my lifetime. And what's pathetic is Trump decided that he needed to show up to Madison Square Garden to ruin the fun. It's like basketball for millions of Americans and people around the world get their mind off of politics. That's what sports is supposed to do. Get their mind off of politics. And, and Trump likes to politicize everything. That's what he does. He is a master of saying that, well, I was just almost shot. Let's get Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Yeah, that's his spiel. Oh, the shooter loved Jimmy Kimmel. No, your bullshit is the reason why you got, people want to shoot you. It's because the shit that comes out of your mouth is what wants to kill you. And the same shit with Charlie Kirk. Kirk was assassinated because he was a Second Amendment guy. And he promoted the wrong things in life. That's what these people do, folks. And now people are having to wait hours to get into Madison Square Garden. They have to go through a ton of security because of Trump. And, you know, it's not just Midas touch, but even Stephen A. Smith, who is probably one of the smartest sports commentators of our day, he has stood up and said that he is angry at Donald for the fact that he wants to go to Madison Square Garden. But he said, this is why most political leaders don't go to sporting events. It's because of all the security that they have to deal with. And it's a bad thing for everybody, and all the spectators. And of course, people are paying big time dollars to go to these games. But here's another problem. Another problem too is, guess who owns the Knicks? James Dolan, who just happens to be, surprise, surprise, a good friend of Trump's. And I'll bet you there's a ton of sports team owners who are good pals with Trump, because they're all most of them are Republican. Although some of them, thankfully, aren't that political. Yeah, I was actually pretty happy that the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl this year, due to the fact that the woman who owns it, she was the sister of Paul Allen, who owned it. Of course, Paul Allen passed away, and anyway, he left it. He left the sports teams to his sister, and she's not very political. She actually gives to environmental causes, not political. And meanwhile, New England, their owner, well, he's Robert Kraft, he's butt buddies with Trump. And that's the way it is. You see, Donald Trump makes a scene everywhere he goes. And it's all about me. He acts like he's a fucking king. He's a dictator. And he thinks that people will love him no matter what he does. Okay, so what if he takes your house away? Like his kids are doing in Albania. Look, man, I don't want to go back to apartment life again. I know, folks, my neighborhood's not perfect. I mean, I got a guy who lives across the street from me. He's a bit of a wacko. He's always out at all hours doing chores around the house, and sometimes he, even in late hours of the night, he'll saw wood. And there's another problem in my neighborhood. There's this crazy old woman. She walks around with two canes. And I mean, she's a bit of a weirdo. She actually came to our house last week and wanted to use our lawnmower because she claims that her uncle stole it from her. And I'm like, she looks like she's fucking 80 years old. How can she have a living uncle? Oh my God. But the story was, my lawnmower is electric. And, I think it would be too confusing to her to use. I mean, she's probably used to, the old gas mower, gas and oil. And mine is electric, and I love mine because, it doesn't use gas or oil. It just uses batteries. And, and she even said, well, if you don't want me to give me your lawnmower, you can come and mow it yourself and I'll pay you. Okay, just because I own a lawnmower doesn't mean that you can use it. Just because I have a car and doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm your Uber driver. Happened to be in high school. Too many kids wanted me to be their Uber driver. Did they help me pay money and gas? Nope. When my car ended up in the shop, because the transmission blew, did they help me pay for that? No, they were all using me. And guess what? People have used me for years because, my parents unfortunately taught me to be too nice to people. But guess what? I'm 45 years old. Those days have come to an end. Yeah. So, if you want me to drive you all over the place, and if you don't have a dime to your name, well, get down on your knees, bitch, and suck my dick. The point is, folks, is that we gotta show Trump we don't like him. And I know I'm a broken record. We can't just vote for willy-nilly Democrats who just say, I hate Trump. Okay, what are you going to do about health care? What are you going to do about jobs? What are you going to do about taxing the wealthy? That's what you got to think about. This is why here in Michigan, Abdul El-Sayed is in the lead for the Senate. I will definitely be voting for him this fall. In the primaries. And he is way ahead. Ahead of Mallory McMallow. And definitely way ahead of Haley Stevens. Haley, by the way, she's been unleashing a ton of ads on TV now. And I'm like, yeah, she's way behind in the polls. Yeah, she's definitely a centralist. And that's why that's why only her ads are on TV right now. Of course, for governor, you got current Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson going up against some cop from Oakland County. He's definitely going to lose. Yeah. Sorry, but not sorry. I think, Jocelyn Benson's going to be the winner. Yeah. Fuck all the Republicans running for governor, especially that redhead little bastard, Perry Stevens. Perry, what's his name? Yeah, Mr. 4747. You see, folks, just because you say you're a Democrat doesn't mean you are. We got to get the real McCoy in there. Because I've seen too many people who call themselves a Democrat who actually stand with some Republican bullshit. And I mean, to me, the worst people out there are maggots. But second place to me are those who call themselves a Democrat, and yet they voted for the Republican bullshit. And basically they look at people like me like I'm a loser. And I'm an idiot. And all I can say about that is, because of that, if I was up in northern Michigan and if I had to listen to any nonprofit radio station, it would definitely be 99.7 Village Radio. Not NPR. Definitely not one of the Christian stations, and definitely not WNMC, especially after what their morning guy, who pretended to be a friend of mine for years, turned out to be a royal asshole. Yeah. Long ass story. But I need to move on. And we all need to move on. Just do it, folks. Let's get the dead weight out of politics and tell Trump that his fix is out of there. And let's truly make America great again by telling him, fuck off. Got it, folks? Yes. So that's what we gotta do, folks. Let's work together and create a solution instead of people like Trump who would like to run away from his problems because of that old saying, taco. Yep. Trump always chickens out. Good day and good luck. I'll talk to you later, folks. Bye-bye.